What was that?
Something is missing at Apple these days. I don't know if it's just me. It just felt disconnected. They introduced Apple Intelligence without any intelligence from Apple. I don't think partnering is the right strategy for Apple here.
There is nothing wrong with using AI in a tactical way, in my opinion, right? You don't have to have a master plan at all costs. But Apple has invested 14 years on research and development on Siri. 14 years.
And it's crap.
This is why nobody should give Apple the benefit of the doubt. You know you need to invest in that technology, you know you need to integrate it, but at the same time you risk a massive reputational damage. So what do? To minimize your risk, one possible strategy is to become a broker. This strategy is not a sustainable strategy for Apple to win in a world of AI assistant where the smartphone becomes a dumb pipe.
Congratulations!
Today, I want to talk about Apple Intelligence.
I was going to tell you. I'm like, hey, did you watch the Apple event?
What was that? What was that?
I don't know, man. I mean, I liked it was smart for them to play on AI as Apple Intelligence, but I don't know if you agree. I felt like the way they positioned it, like they left AI all the way to the end, and they sort of, I don't want to say ignored AI, but they're trying to claim AI. I don't know if it worked. It was just a lot of different messages. Like something is missing at Apple these days. I don't know if it's just me. It just felt disconnected. Like there's just the whole point of Apple was this very integrated ecosystem. I don't know if I got that sense from this last WWDC.
Do you mean you didn't like the moment where they demo this multi-million-dollar AI model, because it takes multiple millions to train one of these generative AI models, and then they use a multi-million-dollar model in the demo in front of the entire world watching to ask what is the weather tomorrow? You didn't appreciate that?
No, especially because if you go to other WWDCs, I mean, that was one of the main questions that was asked by, to Siri, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? I'm like, can you come up with a more intelligent, more Apple intelligent question? Like, come on.
How much time do we have for this episode? Because I have so many complaints, so many things to point out that probably is going to take 4 hours. I don't know.
Hey, knock yourself out. I mean, I'd love to get some of your insights, some of your thoughts. Like I said, I watched it. I mean, I love Apple products just like you and others. I just felt desperation. Like they didn't really have anything, and they're kind of hiding behind Apple Intelligence. So they were able to, marketing was smart. I'll give them that. But I don't know if it hit home, at least not for me. Like, I'm like, okay, cool. You played on it. It worked for you, but there's nothing behind it. Like I was not wowed at all.
So you know that I write this newsletter about artificial intelligence since 1.5 years, synthetic work, and I dedicated last week issue entirely to Apple Intelligence, and I made a massive issue all talking about this, because there's so much to say, and what you kind of felt is very much what I said in the newsletter, which is there was a at least perceived lack of cohesion in the strategy. So the way Apple has always implemented AI, not just generative AI, any form of AI, has always been tactical and opportunistic. When they see an opportunity to use AI to polish the user experience, to remove the friction, you know I'm a big fan of this, just to me is an imperative, to remove the friction from the experience, they use it. And that's fantastic. So you have the AirPods, they use AI to do a magic isolation of the background noise, and this is incredible. People cannot live without it. That's great. Then they do things like recognizing faces in photos and then increasing over the years the number of objects, and all of this is great. But there's never been a master plan, a strategic approach to AI, something that is centrally defined all the ways that AI should infuse the different Apple products. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. This is the key part that I want to clarify before we dig deeper into this. There is nothing wrong with using AI in a tactical way, in my opinion, right? You don't have to have a master plan at all costs. But the moment you are facing a world where there might be a GTP5 or a GTP6, these AI assistants, as we say in the first episode of Reality Distortion Fields, this AI assistant might eventually become your factotum. They will run errands for you. And if they run errands for you, the risk for Apple, not for me, is that we shift from an app-centric world to an intent-centric world. So you describe the intent, and then you don't care about the app per se. Now, if you don't care about the app per se, it means that the fact that the app is on the smartphone, which today is the gateway to access the world information that you want to do, the things you want to do, the things you want to need, you want to learn, that the smartphone is no more your gateway, and the apps can live anywhere. They could live in Google data center or Facebook data center, don't care. What becomes important is just the gateway changes from the smartphone, it becomes the app that you use to interact with the assistant. And so all of a sudden, it's no more the smartphone that is your gateway, but is, for example, WhatsApp or Instagram or even Google search if they have an access to Google AI assistant. And that is the word that Apple, I was expecting, would try to anticipate and prevent or proactively defend against with Apple Intelligence. And instead we saw, exactly as you said, more of the same. Like, okay, let's sprinkle AI here and there so you can do AI-generated emoji.
So did this catch you? And maybe you can correct me here. So they introduced Apple Intelligence. Hey, and that's a big term, right? So if you take a step back, everything you just described, Apple was always a pioneer, right? It was Apple led the way in terms of innovation, in terms of wow. And I love Apple Intelligence as branding. But so here's what they did. This is the reality distortion field. They introduced Apple Intelligence without any intelligence from Apple. The intelligence is coming from...
Right, so let's talk about this. You're right. This is a good point. So Apple Intelligence in reality is two things. It's not one, it's two separate things. One is Apple Intelligence, meaning stuff maybe is a little bit too generic in this context, meaning models that have been trained or at least fine-tuned by Apple. And they will use two models. So one is a 3 billion parameters that resides on device for those devices that have an M1 chip or superior, and then another model larger that will reside on specially designed Apple servers somewhere in a data center. So these two models take care of a certain amount of certain type of requests. For example, I would expect that the thing of the instantly generated, on-demand generated emoji, that would be managed by these models. So there is a little bit of stuff that is from Apple. Now, there is a twist though, even in this, which is, according to the information we know in a preliminary way, in a sort of rumor way, even these models were not really developed by Apple. Some of them, at least one of them, might be an evolution of a model that was originally developed by Meta. And I know I don't want to get into the technicality of this. I don't think it's important. But the thing is that there is some unsubstantiated information that this might not really be 100% Apple tech. And then there is the second part of Apple Intelligence, what I call non-Apple Intelligence. And this non-Apple Intelligence is one that relies on third-party AI providers, and the first of which is OpenAI. So in that second portion of it, what's happening is that Apple is acting as a broker. and is brokering the relationship with the AI provider, creating a tighter integration with iOS or iPadOS or macOS. And then going forward, they already said that they want to expand this brokering relationship with Google, with Gemini, and so forth, which is another crazy decision. Don't get me started. But this is the point.
I want to interrupt you real quick here, but do you think that's the right approach, or should they be either developing their own or acquiring? Because it doesn't feel like Apple can afford to miss out on this. Like, I don't think partnering is the right strategy for Apple here.
Right. So I spend a lot in the newsletter about this very point. And it's a fantastic question. So this is my take on this. And this is part of the context that we need to understand what we really saw at the WWDC keynote. Apple has invested 14 years of research and development on Siri. 14 years.
And it's crap.
And it doesn't do anything but setting the timer for your pasta when you cook it every day, at least in my case. That's what it does. I'm alone in a room 1 foot away from the device, and I need to shout 3 times for it to finally set it up. After 14 years, millions of dollars of R&D, but there is more. This is infuriating. This is why nobody should give Apple the benefit of the doubt at this point. In 2018, I forgot, Apple hired the very top of Google AI and search, the head of Google AI, Google Search and AI, John Gianandrea. So they hired the top shot at that time, the biggest deal in the IT industry, from Google, that was considered at that time the top of the top in terms of AI, and they moved him to Apple, and he started leading the effort in AI. So you would say, okay, at that point, Apple didn't know too much about AI or didn't care enough about AI. So this guy knows everything about AI. He's going to resurrect Siri and improve it. And he said, no, Siri went worse. Siri started to have issues of all sorts in terms of understanding the pronunciation, in terms of the things he could do, and all sorts of stuff. Now, you might argue that I use his team, his resources, his skills, his capabilities to improve AI in other areas. But that's the point. The point is that the company did not believe and did not succeed in developing the AI assistant that today their claim is going to be amazing. And so we get to your point. Sorry, I'm always so very long. The point is
No, that's perfect.
After 14 years of trying, they made an acquisition because Siri came from a company. They didn't develop internally. It was originally an external product from an external company. They acquired the company. They launched the app as their own, and then 1 year after, it was integrated fully in the operating system. And yet, despite all of these things, they failed and failed and failed and failed increasingly so. And so one argument that you could make is this. They look at today's generative AI, which they didn't come to first before the others. And they say, okay, this technology has enormous potential. We cannot afford to be left behind. We need to integrate this, probably also because of the pressure from shareholders.
But I was going to go there. I think the stock price had a lot to do with it, but continue your thought.
Right. And so they know that they cannot afford to skip this, but then at the same time, they know that this AI is prone to hallucination, so much so that after the WWDC, Tim Cook sat down in an interview and he said, I'm not sure, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not sure that hallucination will 100% go away ever. Okay, so he knows perfectly what's the problem. And so you are in this balance, in this limbo where you know you need to invest in that technology, you know you need to integrate it, but at the same time you risk a massive reputational damage, which,
I agree 100%.
Which Google doesn't seem to care. So what do? To minimize your risk, one possible strategy is to become a broker. So you become a broker of multiple AI providers, and the minute that one of them is misbehaving, the AI is not performing at the level of standard that Apple has, you just kick him out. And in this way, you kind of maintain a position where you say, well, it was not really us. It was not really me that did a mess. But still, at the end of all of this, if this is really the strategy, this strategy is not a sustainable strategy for Apple to win in a world of AI assistant where the smartphone becomes a dumb pipe. This is the problem.
So you mentioned something super interesting, and this is where I think the reality distortion comes into play. I'm going to ask you something. We're going to assume, right? If Steve Jobs was around, he wouldn't have cared about the shareholders. He wouldn't have cared about the share price, and he did that back in the 80s with the Mac when they delayed the launch. I think it was the Mac 2 or whatever it is, because it didn't have fonts. Like, yes, there was pressure from shareholders. Yes, they needed a position on AI. Yes to everything you said. But this felt like a rush job. They introduced things that, to your point, hey, we're just going to integrate and broker with everything else. They're positioning their hardware to basically, on the one side, they're basically, hey, if you want all this AI stuff, you need to go to the latest chip, the latest iPhone.
That's another topic I want to explore later.
And if you don't want it, then you're going to go with the iPhone that doesn't have the AI. Who the heck is going to go with that iPhone? Like, you just killed part of your iPhone lineup, in my opinion. And they're trying to hide behind iOS and Mac version updates, where that's an entirely different mess. But if we stick with AI, my question, I guess, to you is, I like Tim Cook, but I like him as he managed Apple well. But this is where I think a Steve Jobs wouldn't have launched this. Right. He would have said no.
This is a speculation because things changes. Even Steve Jobs, like every other human, grows and evolves and gets older and changes perspective.
But he pushed back on shareholders. If you look at the history, he didn't care. Like, he always pushed back. So my question, again, speculation, but
you're right. But two things. The first one is that when he left the company to Tim, he told him, don't try to think like me. Do what is in your nature. So he was already expecting, and he was asking, that the company would take a different strategic direction. And the company is taking a different strategic direction because, as you said, as is well known, Tim Cook is a master of execution. He's not a visionary. He doesn't have anything about vision. He relies on his lieutenants and the entire chain of command to decide what is the right vision to do. And then he's sure that Apple works like a clockwork. And that's fine. And so it is sort of expected that his Apple is not the same as Steve Jobs' Apple. And that probably Steve Jobs would have done things differently in this context. I don't know. I don't want to speculate into this too much. To me, I have a feeling that you're right on this, 100%. Surely there is a perception, right or wrong, that the company was under immense shareholder pressure to show something. And there was also this 14 years of, for a lack of a better word, shame about the state of Siri. There is more to say about Siri, but there are other things that Apple did that nobody in the press talked about that are incredibly important in the context of Apple Intelligence. One of those things is another technology that they acquired called shortcuts. In reality, the company that made shortcuts, the company was called Workflow. And they, just like Siri, launched on the App Store as an independent company that could automate in a visual drag and drop way so that even a non-technical user could use it. You could drag and drop and create simple workflow to automate certain aspects of the operating system. So for example, if I, the owner of the iPhone, arrive at this particular location, automatically send a message to my mom or my friend and say, I have arrived. I don't know, little things like that. Now, that is another technology that Apple has acquired and has kept not integrated with Siri, and in a state of limbo for 8 years. Or 1 year and a half ago, only, believe it or not, only 1 year and a half ago, they finally made the integration between Siri and this shortcuts technology. But this is an integration that should have happened the day after the acquisition. Because it comes, this is something that they said at the WWDC. They said that in the future, Siri will be able to do actions. So it's not just a large Apple intelligence. It's not just a large language model, but it's a large action model. And to do an action, you need to have an automation engine to execute the action that the large language model comes up with. But you had already that technology, shortcuts, and you didn't do anything with it for 7 years, 8 years, I don't remember exactly. And so what does he say to Apple shareholders about Apple's vision and commitment, about the building blocks of Apple Intelligence? This is the concern that I would have as a shareholder and also as an app developer.
So you agree this, what Apple did was the ultimate reality distortion. Now,
well, that sounded pretty big distortion. There was another element of distortion, but we'll get to that later.
I feel like at this point, Tim Cook has had a good run. I don't know if he's the right person to move Apple into this AI world. This event kind of, for me at least, crystallized that, hey, they need fresh blood. They need new blood. They need new leadership. They need, I hate to keep saying this because I use this example everywhere. They need a Satya. Like if you look at Microsoft, the day this guy took office, right? The company flipped. It changed upside down. You could feel it at every level, even though everyone in the leadership stayed the same, but the company just felt more focused. It felt they had a goal. It was rejuvenated. And looking at this WWDC, I can't help but think, hey, they need a change. And it's not necessarily the product or the strategy it is, but I think they need a leadership change.
Probably. But we already know that there is a succession plan in motion at Apple. There are a few names that are in the short list. So this is expected eventually. Now, Apple is making two big bets at the moment. One is the Vision Pro, and the other one now is the Apple Intelligence. There is a third bet that I believe they will make at some point in time. Maybe not this year, but in the next few years. And this connects to Apple Intelligence, something you said moments ago, which is one of the reality distortion fields that they throw on stage at the WWDC is that they didn't exactly say like that, but that was the implied message, is that they designed the M1 chip to do AI. I don't think so. I mean, maybe, but it doesn't really feel like that. What is more likely is that, and this is the third bet I'm talking about, is that Apple developed the M1 chip, or in general, Apple Silicon, because they want eventually to launch a gaming console. A gaming console that can rival in terms of performance with the next generation PlayStation and Xbox. So not the current generation, but the next one, right? So, and you can tell because literally for years now, at every single event, Apple has talked in one way or another about the increasing performance in gaming, or showed videos about gaming, or are talking about games.
Super interesting.
So to me, it's clear from that they started 10 years ago and they say, what is the next gigantic multi-billion dollar market we can enter? We can enter games. So they started small with Apple Arcade just to test the water, to understand what kind of games people are interested in. So they collected a trove of data about what games people like, for how long they play, what is the price they're willing to play, all these things. And at the same time, they started to develop the Apple Silicon, so the M series chip, not thinking about the performance of today's computer when they started, but thinking about, okay, what is going to be the performance of PlayStation 6 or 7? Because they want to leapfrog them there. So incidentally, a lot of the characteristics of the chips that work for gaming are characteristics that are useful for AI. And so they can come on stage and say, oh, you know, we did the M1 chip because we were thinking about AI. I don't think so. I think that you are trying to build a gaming console, and incidentally, that chip is perfect for artificial intelligence. And so, oh, look, I don't believe so for a minute. So that's a big point.
That could be super interesting with the Vision Pro at some point.
Yeah,
because
of
as the
course.
Vision Pro comes down in price and they're ready to launch some kind of a gaming console,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Xbox or Sony have any virtual reality
Yeah, they do. Yeah, of
things
course.
right now. Do
Yeah,
they?
yeah, they do. They have
Okay.
they have two different visors that you can use. Microsoft has an amazing visor that has even been tested by the
You're
US
talking about the
Army.
HoloLens.
Huh?
The HoloLens.
Yeah, exactly. The HoloLens is amazing. And then
But is it sold with Xbox? Like, is it
is it connect?
specifically for?
Yeah, it's connect.
Okay, so there's a connection. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's wireless or not, but the
Okay.
point is that they need to work
Oh,
together. Yeah.
that's interesting. You're right. They have the developers in the games. They have the platform because they've been developing it for years. They have the chips. They have Vision Pro, still super expensive, but whatever. So they have all of the components for a gaming console. All they need is a form factor right now.
Right.
That's
So
super.
and they could put that inside the Apple TV or whatever.
TV.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the point has always been, in terms of gaming in the Mac, in the Apple ecosystem, that the hardware was never optimized to run games. And so just like AI workloads, Mac is the last place where you want to run a game. It's the last place where you want to run AI workloads. And I know because I did research and development on Mac machines for 2 years, generative AI, and it sucks so bad that nobody in the world would want to do that. So this was another part of the reality distortion field. So, but if you reinvent the hardware and you make the hardware super competitive in terms of performance, then it's a different story. Then it's a different game. Then you can talk it. Then you can talk about that. And then generative AI happened to blossom. And they say, well, we're already in the right path, so we just make a little adjustment. We make a big marketing story out of it. This is my interpretation of what really happened. It's much harder for me to believe that M1 was designed from scratch by the AI. And I say this because for years they mentioned gaming, and for years they made a zero mention of AI. Zero, never once.
AI took everybody by storm. Anyone that says otherwise is lying. And again, we've talked about this before. Before AI, before this Chat GPT craze came, what was the whole hype in the market? What was the entire conversation, whether it's the hyperscalers, whether it was Apple, everyone, Google, Microsoft, what was it? It was custom silicon. Everybody was talking about custom silicon.
Yeah.
Now, it comes up even the messaging shifted. Like if you look at their messaging, it went from just custom silicon everywhere and all the benefits and what it can do and getting into the nitty-gritty of technical capabilities and performance and energy and saving the planet to poof, nothing. Very, very little about custom silicon. And now everything's AI. And oh yes, we did this for AI, but that's total BS.
And then there is another reality distortion field. The one, I don't know if you if you saw the whole WWDC presentation start to finish, but there is another gigantic one towards the end. Did you see the segment where they announced the partnership with OpenAI? Did you see that part?
Yes.
All right, okay. So in that part, if you remember, they go on stage with great fanfare and they say, oh, this will be free for all our users. And the entire social media ecosystem exploded. Like this was the greatest gift given to humankind. Except that OpenAI made already free access to the latest and greatest model, which is now called GPT-4o, On May, the 13th of May, I believe, of this year, they already removed the need to have a subscription. You can have a subscription, I have a subscription. If you want to go beyond a certain limit of daily number of messages or a certain speed of reply, whatever, it doesn't matter now. But it was already free. You just go download the ChatGPT and it's free. So Apple has done nothing. Not only that, they say at some point, written in one of the slides, that if the users, the Apple user base, wants to use the additional features, additional capabilities of OpenAI, they need to connect the OpenAI account with the Apple settings component, and then they will unlock the rest. And so you change absolutely nothing. There is no difference from me using the standalone app versus, sure, there is the difference of the integration, fine. But then even there is another absurdity, which is, if you remember, there is a point, there is a screenshot that they show where if you want to talk to ChatGPT through this new integration, then you will have a pop-up that says, yes, I approve this request to go to OpenAI. I mean, who would do that?
And that reinforces the notion that this was rushed. They were in a hurry. They reacted. They didn't think this through. But here's my question to you. And this is the whole point of why we do this, right? To call this out. But do you think they are aware? Do you think that, and this is the challenge with these companies, it's not just an Apple problem, it's an everyone problem, which is why we have this podcast. Do you think they have people, whether internal, external, advisors, analysts, whatever you want to call it, that are having these frank conversations with them, that are calling this out, that are basically saying all of these things, or do you feel like Apple really believes in what they did?
So, hard question, difficult to answer. Speaking from over a decade of experience, first-hand experience, I can say this. Every company that is successful, every CEO that is successful thinks he's right or she's right.
That's right.
Because by definition, he's successful, she's successful. So who are you? What credentials do you have to come and tell me that you know better than me when I did something that you never done? So it will forever be a non-starter. Now, some CEOs are a little bit more enlightened than others, and they look for sounding boards. So they talk to trusted advisors or to friends, confidants, whatever it is, and they say, hey, I'm thinking this, what is your idea? Then they do their way, but they still are open-minded. But the large majority, especially the ones that are being very successful, don't give a crap. They just say, if I've been so successful, then I'm right. And I have first-hand experience with people like this. Okay, cool. So in this case, it is possible that Apple is aware that they are doing a lot of hand-waving, but because they have no other answer after 14 years of failures with Siri and with shortcuts, that this is the best thing that they can do for now. There is nothing better that they can do. So they get along, they use their incredible marketing skills to package it in a way that is highly compelling. But at the end of the day, and this is the question for you, and this is the question also for Apple shareholders, would you buy a £1,000, $1,000 iPhone because there is Apple intelligence inside? This is the question. Does that move sales? Does it change the sales equation? Would you buy it?
So I'm a little mixed on that. Personally, I probably won't. Like when I'm looking at the rumors of the iPhone 16, the only thing that is interesting to me in the iPhone 16 is not the chip this year. They're talking about a button that's kind of like a DSLR camera button where you could pressure push and it focuses and presses whatever. That's interesting, but is it interesting enough for me to upgrade from my iPhone 15 Pro so that I can take advantage of whatever additional AI capabilities the phone's gonna have? I don't think so, but I think the message will resonate. I think with most folks, they're going to sell it as, if you want AI, then this is the iPhone AI phone and you will need to upgrade. I do think they will. I do think it will help. So the marketing will work. I think it will hurt them in the long run. It will not hurt them in the short run. I think what they're doing with the other iPhones, the iPhone and the iPhone Plus, that will also hurt. But I think from a sales perspective, yeah, the message will work.
Okay. Well, I respect that. I don't share the same opinion. I believe that most of the people will not buy an iPhone just because of Apple Intelligence in the way Apple Intelligence has been presented today. I want to make this very clear. And this comes from a person that has dozens of Apple devices. I have dozens of Apple devices. I've been with Apple for close to 20 years. So for a brief period of time.
But you're a super user.
Yeah, but what I mean, yes, yeah, I of course. But what I'm trying to say is that I love the company, I love the brand, I love the polishness, I love the attention to details, I love the uncompromising, relentless search for quality. They are one-to-one, in most cases, matching what are my top priorities in life when I look at a product. So this is not a guy that is bashing Apple just because it doesn't like Apple. I love Apple, right? So this is the context, and in this context, I still look at the Apple Intelligence as it was presented today, and I say, no, I will not upgrade or buy a new phone because of Apple Intelligence, because it's not enough. It's nowhere even close to enough, especially as it was presented. But then I ask myself, and I ask you, if tomorrow you would have OpenAI coming to you and say, hey, I created an Android phone because they don't have anything else, okay? Completely customized Android phone, which has GTP5. Assume that GTP5 has the same level of intelligence of the AI you saw in the movie Hair, okay? So the omni-capable AI assistant. Would you consider buying that phone? Would you consider switching? If you would have that level of incredible integration with the operating system that you don't get clearly with Apple Intelligence.
So I'm going to tell you a little secret. Since the first iPhone, I have never owned anything except an iPhone. I've never owned an Android phone. I went from, I believe my last phone was a Nokia or a Motorola, I don't remember, to the iPhone, and I haven't switched since. So for me, it would be very difficult. Is it enough to have the AI intelligence? I don't know. I would reverse the question and ask you, what if, I mean, there's probably a ChatGPT from OpenAI app today.
Yeah, there is.
That can be installed.
Yeah, but it's not the same
iPhone.
thing. Yes, but what I'm talking about
But if it were, so here, hypothetically, if it were, and it can take advantage of all the hardware, wouldn't that be enough?
But it will never happen. Yes, of course it would be enough. But the whole point, the whole question hinges on the fact that it will never happen. And this is where Apple is in an especially precarious situation. Because right now they're positioning themselves as provider of a tiny little tactical AI and broker of big, strong AIs. What does it mean? It means that they will not let the third-party AI providers, like OpenAI, like Meta, like Google, to have full control of the OS. They will not allow the deepest possible level of integration. They will not. So if Apple fails in delivering compelling AI, they will not just botch their own offering. They will ruin the entire market because they will also block others to do better. They will not allow OpenAI. They will never say, oh, we suck at Apple Intelligence after, 3 years of trying, so we let OpenAI go deeper into the iOS integration and let them control the whole OS. It will never happen.
Aren't they letting Microsoft in? I mean, I can't.
Yeah, but we're talking about something, yes, but we're talking about something very different. We're talking about an AI that is capable of controlling every API in the operating system to literally take over and use the device as a terminal for whatever it is that the user wants. So again, the AI assistant that runs errands on the internet for you To do that, you need to have full access to a set of APIs. There is a lot of implication in terms of security, blah, blah, blah. So I don't believe for a second that Apple would ever do that, even if they fail with Apple Intelligence.
It would move away from everything they've done historically, which is software and hardware are integrated.
Right, exactly. And so if OpenAI wants to offer the AI that we saw in the movie Hair, what are their options? They have to have...
Maybe a Microsoft phone. Maybe a Microsoft phone.
Well, don't get me started on that. I believe that in Redmond, they're biting their nails because they abandoned the Windows Phone platform, and now they would have been if tomorrow Microsoft, even today, Microsoft announces that they're resurrecting the Windows Phone platform, I don't blink, because I would be completely expecting this.
That could be interesting. I mean, again, there's a partnership with OpenAI. Maybe what you just said about the OpenAI phone could be, it doesn't have to be a Windows phone. It could be a Microsoft phone. So it could be branded differently.
Yeah. We know that Microsoft's made significant investment in Android, and they make more money than Google on Android. So it doesn't have to be a Windows Phone. But clearly, Windows Phone would mean a certain kind of design, a certain kind of control, and so forth. But yes, it can be anything. The point is that for Google, for Microsoft, for Meta has less this problem, and I will say why in a second. But for OpenAI, the way to have the tightest possible in integration and unlock the full potential of an AI assistant is to go deeper at the API level. And Apple would never allow that. And so what's the option for these companies?
I don't know if you agree. I just don't know if this is a sustainable relationship between Apple and OpenAI for a variety of reasons. One of them is what you just mentioned. Second is how much Microsoft has in terms of partnership, ownership of OpenAI. Third, the only way this is going to work, and again, to reinforce your point, is they would have to go deeper and more integration. That would go against everything Apple has preached since its inception. Yeah. So there's something has to be working at Apple where they're developing an alternative to OpenAI, or they're going to acquire a Claude or something this cannot be the end of the road for this story.
Okay, and so we go back to the starting point, which is why Apple Intelligence doesn't seem like that grand master plan, coherent, strategic approach to AI. And one possible answer is, of course, one we already said, that the leadership is not up to the task, right? But I don't want to assume that it would be. I don't think that we have that kind of visibility into the company or even the standing for us to come here very pretentiously and say something like that. So I prefer to not go into it. One alternative that seems much more likely to me, is that Apple leadership does not see a future like the one I described, like the one that we were talking about a second ago. So what I perceive being a threat for the company's future, smartphones become dumb pipes, and the AI interface becomes the only place where or the main place where you interact with the world. If they don't see that world coming, that scenario being a threat, then their approach to AI is just use it tactically like we always did, and it's fine.
So this is a VMware moment. This is where VMware looked at cloud and said,
possibly,
no, we're just going to stick with what we're doing, and this thing is just going to pass. So it feels, and so now I'm starting to understand what you meant, and I agree with you. So you're thinking of a world where iOS needs to be the intelligence. Like, there is no difference between iOS and Apple Intelligence. They are one and the same, as opposed to the integration with OpenAI.
Yeah.
So I see it now. I understand what you mean.
Right now, to do things, what do we do? We download an app. Let's say that we wanna hail a cab. Okay, so we download Uber, And our interface with Uber and the world, so to get things done, we need one thing, which is on top of the app, of course, we need a smartphone. So whoever owns the smartphone is our gatekeeper, right?
That's right.
Now, imagine though a future, this is what I was trying to say, a future where you don't care what the app is, because you don't touch the UI elements of the app. There is no app that is visible anymore. There is only one thing, which is your...
Yep.
Not
your
even... So
yeah.
that would be even more interesting, right? So there will be, let's say, one thing, which is the UI of the AI assistant. You just go there for everything. A little bit like the Chinese ecosystem where you have just one app that is WeChat, I don't remember which one is, where there is absolutely everything there. So you have one single app that acts as a macrocosm for all the other apps, okay? So imagine that there is an AI assistant that gives you access to the Uber capabilities, okay? Now, two things. First, the interface of the AI assistant is not going to be a prompt as is today, because nobody that is sane, except techies, will want to write into the prompt or will want to type into the prompt for 6 hours. People don't do that. What will happen, maybe not from Apple, but for sure from OpenAI, is that we will have a window that looks like a video phone call, where we will have a human-like assistant, like having the resemblance of a human person.
What would you like, or what do you want, or what's your intent?
Right, so it would be a chat like me and you. Alessandro, how can I help you today? And there is a person in front of me.
Get me an Uber or whatever.
Yeah, and you talk to that thing that is your AI assistant.
And that will interact with the app.
It will go to the app, wherever the app is on the Uber servers, is on the Microsoft servers, is on Apple server, no care. And the user, so me and you, don't care anymore.
I just care about a ride. I don't care where it comes from.
Right.
I agree.
So in this world, and apologies if I didn't clarify this better before, but in this world, what happens is that the smartphone today that is precious to us because it displays the element of the UI, such a nice, neat way, doesn't matter anymore. The only thing that the smartphone has to do is having one app, which is this assistant. That's it. As long as...
So an abstraction layer, basically. It's an abstraction layer.
Exactly. So it means that the smartphone becomes a dumb pipe. That's why I keep repeating the same thing over and over. Because at that point, I don't give a crap anymore if I'm using iPhone 19, or if I'm using the Android phone, or if I'm using the web interface, because my only interface, my universal interface with the world is this synthetic assistant that takes the resemblance I want, speaks in the voice I want, remembers everything about me, and all these things.
Okay, so I'm going to revise my answer. Should an interface like that exist with a different form, with a different hardware that's not Apple, I would probably switch.
And there you go. This is the number one question that Apple shareholders, long-term Apple shareholders, should think about, in my humble opinion.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I love what you just, I love what you just described. It brings everything together. It's a significant threat to Apple. It's a way to dethrone Apple, because right now everything revolves around the device, the OS, and apps.
Right.
And to be honest with you, it's getting annoying. You need an app for everything. You got to download. You got to put in usernames and it's getting annoying.
Right. So it creates an overload. Yeah.
In the age of intelligence, an animated, whatever you want to call, assistant, virtual assistant that basically says, "What do you want? What can I help you with?" Whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And it will go implement my intent. Hey, I want to make a call. Okay. Who do you want to call? Done. I want, give me directions. Done. I don't need to open the Maps app and put in the address, whatever. You can do some of that with Siri today or with some of the other assistants, but we're talking about that becomes the OS.
Yeah. Precisely, which is exactly what was described in the movie here, the intent of that. Now, if you've seen how Sam Altman operates and the kind of leapfrogs that he's been doing in his career, you know that the guy thinks very long term and thinks really big. He is not after a small round of funding, an ordinary round of funding. He wants billions and billions of dollars. We heard crazy numbers like 7 trillion. This guy doesn't want to simply replicate an Android, a Windows phone with the integration. He wants to leapfrog to the hair situation, the hair future. And that's the threat that Apple should think about. Now, back to the previous point. If the leadership doesn't see this as a plausible scenario, or sees the scenario as something far away 15 years from now, that justifies what Apple Intelligence is today. That justifies the fact that they say, it's no big deal, and it doesn't seem likely to happen in the future. But again, even if that's the case, it doesn't mean that they're right, because this is a company that, as impossibly cool as it is, as impossibly visionary as it is, still has failed for 14 years to deliver Siri. So every company, and I've seen this firsthand, has core competencies. You mentioned VMware, okay? Wonderful example. Outside of those core competencies, it's not said that the company is capable of executing. You have a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades of people that you hired specifically in one direction in terms of core competencies. And that hiring process has shaped the DNA of the company. And now all of a sudden you want to transform the company from a company that is an expert in design and hardware and a company that is expert in AI. Not going to happen. No, a flip of the switch.
My friend, this was a really interesting conversation. I loved your thoughts on this. I loved kind of where we settled on it. It's
so we settled on.
I don't want to extend this. I don't want to extend this more, but it reminded me of another episode we did about the remember the
the AI pin. The first episode we did.
The AI pin, and we talked a little bit about the user interface and what that might end up being.
Exactly.
I think everyone is circling your point right now, and if you and I are thinking about this at some point, it's gonna click somewhere. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of years we see something.
It all depends. I think it all depends on what GTP5 will be capable of doing. Because if they show a quantum leap in capabilities and interpretation, understanding and interpretation of human intent, then that will be a wake-up call for a lot of companies, and they will say, oh, crap, this is faster than we realized. Sam Altman said, or at least the OpenAI team on multiple occasions said, that we should expect a quantum leap that is similar to the one from GTP3 to GTP4, which was gigantic. If that's true, if it's no hype, and that's going to be another interesting episode of Reality Distortion Fields, if that's no hype and that's real, a lot of this shaky strategies that we're seeing about AI will all of a sudden collapse because a lot of more companies will feel threatened.
Now, a message from our sponsor.
The truth shall set you free.